Hello, my dear students, and welcome back. I know your exams are just around the corner, and this chapter, The Secret Life of Flowers, well, it can seem a little complicated, right? Don't you worry at all. In just the next few minutes, we're going to make it so simple that you'll master it completely. Ready? Chalo, let's begin.
So here's what we'll cover today. First, we'll see how plants cleverly avoid pollinating themselves. Then we'll look at how the perfect pollen gets chosen. After that, the most important part, the magic of double fertilization. Then we'll see how the baby plant and its food are made. And finally, we'll finish with fruits and some really cool bonus facts. It's a simple roadmap. Let's get going. All right, first things first, how do plants stay strong and healthy? You know, it's funny, plants are a bit like us. They seem to know that variety is super important. So they have these really smart ways to make sure they don't pollinate themselves and instead get pollen from other plants. But why do they even bother? Well, it's because of something called inbreeding depression. It's a simple concept, really. If a plant just keeps pollinating itself over and over, its future generations can get weaker and weaker. You know, think of our cricket team. If you only had bowlers and no batsmen, would you win? No way. You need variety. Plants are exactly the same. Variety makes them stronger. So to make sure they get that variety, plants use what scientists call outbreeding devices. Sounds like a big, complicated term, doesn't it? But it just means they have some simple tricks up their sleeve. The easiest way to remember it? Just think of it like this. Plants are trying their best not to marry their close cousins. This keeps the family line strong. So what are these clever tricks? Well, for one, timing. The pollen might be released at a different time than when the stigma is ready to receive it. Clever, nah? Second, they play with position. The male and female parts are sometimes placed so far apart that self-pollination is just impossible. Third, there's a kind of genetic lock, which we call self-incompatibility. The plant basically rejects its own pollen. And lastly, the simplest trick of all, some plants, like papaya, just have separate male and female flowers. Problem solved. Okay, so let's say a pollen grain has traveled and landed on a stigma. Great. But is that the end of the story? Not at all. The pistil is actually very picky. You can think of it like a bouncer at a big party. It's not going to let just anyone in. And look at this picture. It shows exactly what I mean. See all those pollen grains? They've all landed, but only the right ones, the compatible ones, are allowed to grow. The pistil has this amazing ability to know which pollen is the right type and which is the wrong one. If it's the wrong kind, sorry, entry denied. So how does it know? It happens through a kind of secret chemical dialogue. It's like the pollen has a secret password, and the pistil has to check it. They're constantly talking to each other with chemicals, and only if the password is correct, the pistil says, all right, you're the one, you may enter, and lets the pollen tube grow. And this is what happens next. Once the pollen gets the green light, its tube starts growing down through the style, making its way to the ovule. You know, it reminds me of those super satisfying time-lapse videos on Instagram Reels where you see a tiny seed sprouting. It's just like that, but happening on a tiny microscopic scale. Isn't that cool? Now pay attention. This is a very common 2-mark question in your exams. So how should you answer it? Make sure you write these key points. The pollen-pistil interaction is the process where the pistil recognizes the right pollen. This happens through a chemical dialogue. If it accepts the pollen, it promotes the growth of the pollen tube, which carries the male gametes for fertilization. Just write these points, Beta, and you'll get full marks for sure. And now, Bacho, we have arrived at the superstar event of this chapter, the most important topic. I can almost guarantee you will get a 3 or even a 5-mark question on this in your board exams. So listen very carefully. We are talking about the absolute magic of double fertilization. So what is it? Just look at the name. Double means 2. So it's a process where not 1, but 2 fertilizations are happening inside the embryo sac at the same time. And you must remember this. This is a special superpower that only flowering plants have. Nobody else in the plant kingdom can do this. Let's look at this diagram to understand it. So the pollen tube has entered and released its 2 male gametes. Now watch the magic. One male gamete goes and fuses with the egg cell. At the same time, the second male gamete moves to the center and fuses with the 2 polar nuclei there. 2 fusions happening together. That's the whole secret. Let's break it down with some simple math. Fusion number 1 is called syngamy. Here, one male gamete joins with the egg cell, and together they form the zygote. This zygote will grow into the baby plant, the embryo. Simple. Now, fusion number 2 is called triple fusion. The other male gamete fuses with the 2 polar nuclei. So that's 1 gamete plus 2 nuclei. That makes 3, right? That's why it's called triple fusion, and this forms something called the primary endosperm nucleus, or PEN for short. So what happens after all this magic? Well, the zygote, as we said, starts developing into the embryo, the baby plant. And the primary endosperm nucleus, that develops into the endosperm, which is the food for the baby plant. So basically, the flower's next job is to raise the baby and also pack its tiffin box.
Now here's a very logical question that your examiner might ask. Why does the food, the endosperm, develop first? Why not the baby embryo? Think about it for a second. Why would your mom pack your tiffin box before you're even awake and ready for school?
The answer is so simple and caring. It's to provide assured nutrition. The plant wants to make sure that a nutritious lunch is packed and ready for the embryo the moment it starts to grow. It's just like your mother packing your tiffin box. You know that coconut water you love to drink? That's actually the endosperm. It's food for the tiny baby coconut plant. Amazing, isn't it? Okay, so the zygote grows into the embryo, and here you can see the 2 main types. On the left is a dicot embryo, like in a pea or a channa. Di means 2, and you can see it has 2 cotyledons. On the right, you have a monocot embryo, like in corn or rice. Mono means 1, so it has only 1 big cotyledon, which has a special name, the scutellum. So, what happens to that tiffin box full of food? Well, in some seeds, like peas and groundnuts, the embryo is very hungry. It eats up all the endosperm before the seed is even fully mature. We call these non-albuminous seeds. But in other seeds, like castor and maize, the embryo saves some of the food for later. This leftover endosperm is used when the seed germinates, and these are called albuminous seeds. All right, we're on our last topic now. So the seed is ready, the baby plant is inside with its food, but it needs a protective cover, a strong box to keep it safe, right? Well, that box is the fruit. After this, we'll look at a couple of really weird and wonderful bonus facts. Usually, the fruit develops just from the ovary of the flower. These are called true fruits, like a mango. But sometimes, in plants like apples and strawberries, other parts of the flower, like the thalamus, also join in and become the juicy part we eat. Because it's not just the ovary, we call them false fruits. But let's be honest, they're just as delicious, right? And now for 2 really strange but fascinating ideas. First is apomixis. Can you imagine seeds being formed without any fertilization at all? It's like a plant copying the process of making seeds, but it's actually a form of asexual reproduction. Then there's polyembryony. This is when you find more than 1 embryo inside just 1 seed. It's like plant twins or triplets.
And you know what? You can actually see this at home. It's a fun little experiment. The next time you have an orange, take one of the seeds and squeeze it gently between your fingers. You might just see multiple tiny embryos pop out. That right there is polyembryony. Go on, give it a try. And with that, we've finished our quick revision. I hope it was helpful. But I want to leave you with one final thought to wonder about. Have you ever seen a tiny seed from a banyan tree, a ficus tree? How can something so tiny grow into such a huge, massive tree that can live for hundreds of years and produce billions of its own seeds? The power locked inside a single seed. It's just incredible. Think about that. All the best for your exams, my dears. You are all going to do wonderfully.